Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to the third episode of The Download. We've got Joel Andersen joining us from a different desk in the Download studio.
Can you guys hear me?
Loud and clear.
Louder for those in the back.
There we go. All right. Ladies and gentlemen, thank you again for joining us. The Download is excited to welcome our guest of honor this week, Brooks Snow, founder of Renevar and partner of Tier 4 Advisors. So a lot of people oftentimes will put off projects for a year or two because depreciation is something that they have yet to formalize. And what I mean by that is realize, I guess, fully. So it's, we still got another 2 years left of depreciation, another, whatever it might be. My saying has always been, don't let depreciation get in the way of innovation.
Yeah, that's a good saying.
And not in an effort to sell you something, but I mean, we're sitting here talking about depreciation, and I understand that there's numbers and dollars involved here. But at what point do you, if you're having a conversation with a client and they're saying, yeah, we're going to put that off for another 2 years. Why? Because we bought it, we bought that gear 2 years ago and we still got another 2 years left on the depreciation schedule. What is your conversation like? I mean, obviously we're not trying to sell a client something, but in reality, they're much better off, maybe migrating to a cloud, looking at a managed service, selling that gear, or should they just stay the course and realize their depreciation accordingly?
I mean, some of them may have to based on, financial controls of an organization. I think most can still do something, and it goes back to retirement. You got to, 2 years, and then what happens? It's not like 2 years you make the decision and boom, you move everything. So that conversation.
So is it 10% at a time, just in different, steps along the way?
I'd say you bake, just like you're talking about, like disaster recovery. Can you do the things that can move quickly? I mean, if you're a Microsoft shop, Active Directory, or the user database and management, right? Security, can you start leveraging that? Because that's a big deal. I mean, it's a little more technical probably than other topics, but that's a big first step. You have to move if you're going to go to the cloud or private cloud, right? You have to get that global approach to managing your users. So it's still taking it by app, but yeah, I mean, little by little. That's the whole point, right? Like, it's not like, I'm gonna just boom, 2 years, we're good, we're moving. It never works like that, ever. Have you seen any project where like, we're gonna decide in 2 years, and then 2 years they decide and they go and implement like that? Has that ever happened?
No, not unless they have to. Right, because
force of closure or something like that. Sure, that's a stressful
spot to be.
Yeah.
So as you think about where we are today versus maybe where we are 10 years ago, so what I talk about oftentimes is when I started Tier 4 8 years ago, and I was having conversations with a vast difference of IT end users, whether it was a 200-person company and an IT manager and they're 3 people, or if it was a Fortune 50 company and their entire IT team was 2 times, 3 times larger than the prior company I just mentioned, the entire company. The words never and cloud were oftentimes used in the same sentence, referring to the fact that we will never go to the cloud.
Yeah.
And I found that very interesting because, again, that's like saying I will never, fly on, or I'll never ride in an autonomous vehicle. I mean, how do you
never go to that hotel in space?
Right. Yeah, it's a very fair point. I mean, how do you say never and what is coming? But, the term cloud is relatively new in the last decade. The concept of cloud has been around 30 plus years, right?
Oh, man, yeah.
And so distributed compute, the idea of what it is, I guess my question is where do you see this thing going? Is there going to be a day in a place where everything is in some sort of distributed compute platform of infrastructure as a service, or cloud, so to speak? Or will there be always a hybrid model for these enterprises?
I think globally there'll always be a hybrid, and I say that because we're at this day and age of social media, or everyone thinks what I think, which isn't true. I mean, I was talking to a customer where they sell their software to the Department of Defense, the Navy, and they are disconnected from the internet for months at a time. They still need the software. They have hundreds of thousands of people on board. They have to run projects. They need the same. Those military personnel need the same communication and the ability to communicate, manage software that we need. You have transport vessels the same way if you want to talk non-military. And this company is selling their software, and it's alive and well. And it's specifically for those industries and environments where there is, it's disconnected from the internet. Now, you got Elon Musk throwing up Starlink and all that stuff, and now internet's, who knows, everywhere. Right?
Yeah.
But there's still going to be that need to hybrid, and that's just because I don't think everything's appropriate. I think as we take a different approach to security, like we talked about earlier, you got to think of things differently. So I think there'll always be some hybrid element to it. I just don't know how. I don't know how you couldn't do that. I will also say, this person who said 2 years or I'm never going to be in the cloud. I think that may be a kickback.
They're no longer employed at the place that I met with them at, just for the record, which is tough, but it is what it is.
I'm saying here, he may be saying that from an overreaction, security and concerns and control. Yeah. I call them server huggers, people that don't want to let
I think there was a lack of understanding.
It
right?
is.
And it's one of those, what cloud was 10 years ago or 8 years ago, obviously is not what it is today.
And I'll bet money they were using cloud. He may not have known it.
Sure. Yeah.
The sales team was using Salesforce or something was being done. You think about
Yahoo, email, Hotmail back in the day. You're using what is now the cloud
Gmail,
back in,
Google Workspace.
2005. Right.
So his company was using it. Whether he understood it properly or knew how to categorize or handle it, I don't know.
Let me ask you a couple quick fire questions. I'm just kind of curious if you had to pick or choose, in 2 sentences or less, AWS, Azure, Google, which one are you going with as your primary public hyperscaler of choice?
I'm Azure right now.
You're Azure right now. And why?
The thought of a bookstore running my infrastructure.
They're pretty technical though, right? They're pretty technical. No longer the bookstore.
Well, so this is going to sound like they're no longer a bookstore. Actually, AWS is their most profitable product line. So this will sound like so 2 years ago I've been watching Azure and what they'd done, and no one was talking about them because it was AWS, right? They were building little data centers all over the place, and I was like, ooh. And I remember
edge data centers.
Right. They weren't even called edge then. They were just saying
to the end user.
Yeah, and you got to understand why. Their end users are where? Everywhere.
Everywhere.
Right? They are on the edge. They were only a software edge company if we want to apply it to those terms. And I saw them doing these data centers because I'd watch all these, private cloud space. I'd watch Amazon or AWS, and they only had a few. And I was like, yeah, this is a no-brainer. You can beat them in all different areas. And then I started watching Azure or Microsoft, and I was like, man, these are the guys to watch because I'm like, they're tier 3 cities, not just NFL cities or not just 6 NFL cities.
Sure.
And then when they made that shift to the software, and they basically stuck it to every public cloud provider, said, you know what, we're done letting you run our software on your environment unless you run these, strict rules based on our EULAs or whatever, right? And when that happened, I just thought, man, they started to really get better, and their interface got better. They still have problems and all that, but I like them just because I deal with a lot of companies that deal with Microsoft, and honestly, they've made it easier. They've got some improvement to do still. You would think that they would have the best Active Directory services, but arguably Google has a better one, which is weird. But I'd say Azure. I just like Azure.
So you have AWS that was kind of the leader.
That was way more than 2 sentences, wasn't it?
That was a lot more. You have AWS that was the leader in the public hyperscaler realm. We've got a lot of this compute that is dedicated towards Cyber Monday and all these other things that we have, so we can let you use this during the parts of the year that we're not using it. However, AWS, obviously, last time I checked, at least, they're not selling Microsoft Office. They're also not selling G Suite like Google does. So then now you've seen a little bit of this Azure, gaining traction more so in the last, I guess, 2-3 years. At what point do you think does Google ever overtake Azure or AWS, because now they also have this kind of software, office in a box, loss leader type of approach in addition to their public hyperscaler offering?
I don't think so. I think just because the nature of their business has always been advertisement, right? That doesn't mean they're not going to, they're like the 3rd, 4th largest public hyperscaler now
in the world. Yeah,
Yeah,
so you
globally.
got AWS. I think you do have Azure.
Azure,
Alibaba,
for sure.
I think, might be number 3, and then I think you have Google in there somewhere.
I mean, Azure's claiming number 1 now. That's because you talk about all their cloud. They don't necessarily break it all up, but like, Office 365. If I'm buying their software, that's considered cloud, right? So they're on a tear, right? I think 69 billion last year or something like that. Wasn't that what it was? Joel, fact check me.
A lot of work there, yeah, for sure.
But I'd say Google's is more in the consumer base. I will say this: Azure it's been enterprise, man.
Yeah.
I'll tell you one area Azure went at AWS and has a huge advantage. It's the connecting. One advantage Azure has is the connecting in and out. The hybrid model is AWS is playing catch up in that arena. They're a cloud-born or a native web-based platform, right? Azure knew their base was enterprise, and they had to connect. So that's why they built these places all over. They knew that enterprise. I'm not gonna go the method to connect to AWS Direct Connect.
Right.
When I want enterprise license agreements and go straight in. So that not to get too deep, but that connectivity, that ability, the customer base was already enterprise for Microsoft, right? That's what Azure is. That's a huge advantage, and you're seeing, honestly, like you go back to the person you knew 2 years ago said, "I'll never go cloud." Well, that enterprise they're looking at something.
Absolutely.
They're doing something. So if you're already ingrained in the enterprise space, it's a good place to start looking. I'd say that.
Talk to me about your understanding of these integrators, these managed services providers. For example, the names of Rackspace, Flexential, TierPoint, Lunavi come to mind when you talk about an enterprise or an end user, for example, not just referring to enterprise in the Fortune 500 space, but let's just say an end user that is looking to not only do a digital transformation but also help with the ongoing management aspect of it.
Oh, man.
Where does that kind of play in? And candidly, where should these IT professionals and end users realize that those folks are not there to take their job? They're there to quite literally help enable and empower those people to do their job better.
Oh man, that's overworked, underpaid, underappreciated. IT folks know that. If they're really honest with themselves, they need help. It's tough because they're do-it-yourselfers. I mean, I kind of grew up that way, and
Sure.
letting go is hard.
Right. But is it truly letting go? I mean, is it realizing that it's
a
now
realization, it's a change.
A partner that has 3,500 employees that do this all day, every day.
It's a trust thing.
Right.
And so all I can say is take advantage of that, because you need. I mean, we just talked about cybersecurity. What did you say? What was that, Joel? 50. I don't know what you said. Some big old numbers. 6 trillion and.
Yeah.
Every 11 seconds, right? So you need help. I mean, this is insane. So if you can leverage an organization, a partner who will handle the low-lying infrastructure, patch that stuff for you, so that you can focus on the applications. Remember we talked like you pick a cloud vendor, your job's not done, man. There's all the other work leading up to that. The cloud vendor is going to have requirements. So now, if the biggest thing would be changing that mentality of saying you're getting help that you need, because you can't control this security craziness that's out there.
There's a lot of work to be done for sure. I think that a lot of people look at that managed services conversation as it doesn't save me money immediately, so therefore it doesn't make sense. Where your tone makes it sound more so like it doesn't necessarily matter about the money, not to say that you're going to be able to overcome that challenge internally.
Yeah, you have to deal with the money.
From a budgetary standpoint. Yeah. However, it's one of those you're going to get what you pay for aspect. Would you agree?
Yeah, I'd also say don't let the money stop you. It never has. I mean,
what do you mean by that?
I mean, get creative. Okay, I can't afford blah. I can't afford moving. Great, do what we talked about. Piecemeal it, right?
Figure it out.
Start working through it. Overcome. The financials are usually just a hurdle you do have to overcome. But if you get with the vendors or with Tier 4, you guys. There's creative ways to get around this stuff. I mean, for example, the reason why I said about Azure is you may be able to forego some of those licenses. And so now your costs you thought were here, you're calculating wrong, right? It may be that your company is well, I'm all public cloud, I'm going to do it myself because AWS has this portal, and your numbers were way off. I mean, AWS is 60% higher than most private clouds of all those that you threw out there. And so I'd ask, do you have the correct data?
Right. It's interesting that you bring that up. I mean, I had a conversation, I don't know, a month and a half ago with someone who was suggesting that, oh, we've already looked at cloud. And I said, oh, really? What does that mean? And they went out and did a total cost analysis around what a public hyperscaler all in would cost them, including ingress, egress fees, a lot of these other things. And you're seasoned enough to already know where I'm going with this, but a lot of our viewers, maybe haven't necessarily seen this or done the TCO, analysis, so to speak. But it's interesting to say, that when I was having that conversation, I simply suggested, have you looked at virtual public, virtual private, dedicated private options as well? Or was it just AWS? The answer is no, I'm afraid. Right? So it was something that they did a couple years back. And it didn't make sense because they were only looking at a couple of options from a hyperscaler perspective. There was a lot of other options out there. They just didn't know about it. They didn't think through that concept as well. I think back to my original point when I'm asking about these integrators or managed services providers, a lot of them keep in mind, are there for that long-term relationship. So when they are doing a lot of that work early on, for them it's a loss leader, but they want to help you optimize your environment. And if in fact you partner with someone who is vendor agnostic in that regard, again, just mentioning names like a Rackspace, they can help you understand Google, AWS, or Azure, but also on top of that, if it makes more sense to go to a private cloud or in a colo somewhere, they can help you get to that. And I think Renevar does the same thing.
No, it's spot on. So total cost TCO analysis is, what do they say about statistics? Right, you can make them anything you want.
Sure.
When you look at a TCO, right, are you going in there with the right knowledge? TCO without experience is really not much of anything. So if you have the experience,
kind of relating that to a high-rise building without the foundation.
Yeah, right. Or even a team that's built the high-rises before. So I think at tier 4, right, you're coming in there, or someone like me, Renovar's coming in and saying, look,
built a few hundred high-rises before.
I get what you're saying, but trust me, this is not a bait and switch.
It's a big project.
I'm not. That's the whole point. Like, you're sitting on the side of the table, like I gain nothing by misleading you, right?
That's right.
And so overcoming that and using helping them understand that, hey, I don't think you're looking at the egress fees properly, or ingress fees. You can bypass those by going wholesale and getting a dedicated circuit. Now you have a fixed cost. But maybe that TCO they were planning on a variable, and it gets out of hand. But when you're getting into moving a gigabit per second. Get a dedicated circuit. Now your costs come down. But anyway, I digress some. But yeah, it gets a TCO analysis is only as good as the people with the experience of doing that, right? I mean, if I'm going to build a building, to your point, I've never built one. I'm going to think the worst. It's not possible.
Well, the smart thing to do if you never built a building, but you have to
talk
build
to people, right?
Guess what? You go find someone.
Get someone with that stamp, right? Or an architect, or exactly.
How many buildings have you built? Hundreds. Okay, great. Let's talk.
And this is not to disparage anyone, but if your TCO is that you've never done it, and I get you want to go in there, without any sales team or what you think is a sales team pushing an agenda, it's a different day and age. Sales is not what it is. It's solution architecture. It's value add. It's long-term relationships.
Right.
No one gains anything by, we built the building. See you, suckers, we got paid. That's just not what it is.
I'll share with you, it's interesting also to see a little bit of a shift in IT end users being willing to pay expert vendors to come in and do an assessment.
Yeah.
Which then in turn gives that vendor almost a license to hunt within that account. I'll use an example. We had a client a while back that again didn't know what they didn't know with regards to security and compliance. They went out, paid a vendor partner to come in and do the security and compliance assessment.
Yeah.
That vendor then was one of a few to bid the ongoing MSSP engagement.
I bet they won, right?
Well, it is what it is. But it's interesting to see that shift as well, because a lot of IT end users historically wanted to pay someone else to come in and do some of the work, but then take it out to bid with other vendors. Again, there's a little bit of a shift that's taking place that these folks are willing to accept.
Which is that shift of what?
The shift of just understanding that, frankly, some of these vendors who are going to sell you the ongoing service or remediation or fix are also some of the best vendors to come in and do some of the early work as well.
Yeah. That's right.
So,
well, that makes sense, right? They're fixing and solving, so have them come in, yeah.
all right, let's wrap it up here. You ready to spin that wheel, Brooks?
Spin, yeah.
Go ahead.
Let fate decide the final question.
Yep,
Okay.
let's see it.
Do I just yank?
Yep, pull it.
Nice little spin.
What do you got here, Joel? I can't really see it.
I'll let you know.
Big money, big
Number
money.
13.
Number 13. The question is, what is your favorite band? Your favorite band.
My favorite band all the time I go to in the last 10 years. That's a big difference.
Let's just go with all time.
Ooh. I mean, all time probably the Beatles.
Yeah, great choice.
You can't go wrong with those guys.
The Beatles, I was going to say all time, probably the Beatles as well.
I put
However,
Led Zeppelin up there too.
Pretty good band as well. I'm going to go with Zach Brown Band for mine. All right.
And Brooks, and if someone wants to reach out to you and get a hold of you and Renevar, learn more about you,
Go to renevar.com, renevar.com.
Good stuff. And if you or anyone you know could benefit from some of the Tier 4 advisor services that you've heard about on the download the last few weeks, tier4advisors.com, feel free to reach out to us. We also have regional presidents and affiliates in a number of different cities and states around the country. If you want someone local that can come out and meet with you in person. Again, thanks for joining us on the download. Take care, everybody.
That's a wrap.
All right.